Hello, everyone. It's Mandi Rae of Ecstatic Astrology here for Asteria Sophia Kairos, which is our astrology collective. And there's a bunch, however you want to say it, of ladies in this collective that all have such wonderful ways of looking at astrology. And I'm just one of them. And I'm here to talk to you about the week of December 17th through 24th, Wednesday to Wednesday. Please check out asteriasophiakairos.substack.com. And we're looking at this week as a little bit of a tough one, but it's been a little bit of a tough month. If you watch the last forecast, this one is full of some squares to Saturn. It's got some squares to Neptune. Squares are stressful. Saturn demands commitment and responsibility. So it's not exactly easy, but it does start to turn the tide as we get toward the end of this week, next Wednesday. So I think the key idea here is that this is a threshold week because we're moving from mutable fire, Sagittarius, which is changeable, passionate, into cardinal earth, which is slow and steady. Cardinal does want to get things done though, and that is a Capricorn thing. So we're moving into the solstice here this week and Capricorn season, which is cold for the northern hemisphere, but warm for the southern hemisphere. So I don't like to necessarily say, Capricorn's a cold sign, but it can be. And I don't mean shiver weather wise. I mean, it can be cold and quite decisive. So we're moving from this fun, optimistic sign of Sagittarius to more of a decisive, responsible, structured sign. Sagittarius asks big questions. And so we have the new moon in Sagittarius that starts off the week, December 19th. But then Capricorn asks for commitment, and you can see on the 21st, the sun enters Capricorn. And between those two, December 20th, Venus in Sagittarius squares Saturn in Pisces. And December 24th, Venus enters Capricorn. And I think that's going to be the time when we actually do start to turn the tide into, I'm not going to say all the hard problems go away, but it does start to feel a little better. Everything happening this week is like truth meeting reality. Sagittarius wants to find the truth, it wants to ask the questions, and Capricorn is just reality. So we move from this optimism and inspiration into that needing structure and taking structure. So this is a recalibration time. And of course, I'm not going to predict anything. I really like to look at this as more like the weather for the vibes. So December 19th, new moon in Sagittarius. That's what we start this week off with. That is the big thing to talk about. I'm in the central and southern United States, so it's going to probably look a little different for you. You may not have Leo rising, and that's why I don't like to even talk about the time of day it happens, because it could even be past midnight where you are, and it might be the 20th. December 19th for me, though, around that time frame, we have the new moon at Sag, and that is at 28 degrees. Sagittarius, very late in the sign, and new moons that are late in the sign to me are really, even in a sign that doesn't necessarily commit, you're planting a seed to make something happen. It's the very end of the sign. And then this one is square to Neptune. So by December 19th, the sun has already squared Saturn. Squares are stressful. Saturn demands structure and accountability, and it can be sometimes obstacles, right? So there's already been that kind of vibe, and it's just past that. Now it's going to square Neptune. Neptune can be pretty foggy. Neptune is the opposite of direction. Sagittarius likes direction. It really shoots its arrow. That is the constellation, and even the glyph, it looks like an arrow. And that's why I have the compass here, because it is this question of which direction am I going? What is my truth? Neptune can be a little confusing. And so that's why I guess the image I have is someone who is meditating, who's trying to tap into that part of them, that spiritual part of themselves, to figure out what they really want, what their truth is, what their story is, and what story we're living inside of. And it's not just a goal, because Sagittarius is a philosophy, okay? And I think new moons, you can plant a seed, but we're really planting a seed for what we believe. And it could be based on the obstacles that we've had, because we've already had the sun square Saturn. And it could be based on maybe some of the spiritual concepts that are coming through that we're getting from, the spiritual radio station we're tuning into. So I guess you could ask yourself, what do I believe is possible? Because Saturn kind of looks scary, right? We're like, oh, I don't know if it's possible. Neptune maybe actually gives us a little courage because it's like, hey, don't worry about that. It's possible, but I think we really should ask ourselves what is possible to commit to because we're going to have to make a commitment shortly, right? It's definitely not reckless optimism though. It's just dialogue, we're tapping into our spiritual intuition and we're trying to figure out what it is we truly believe and where we want to go. But I do think Neptune in a way gives us just enough of that wild belief without limits that we can maybe go, I can do this. But I think it's like this is untested, okay? So this is like, okay, I know it's untested, but I think I'm gonna try this. What am I ready to take a leap to do? But I need better footing because I've just had the square to Saturn. So I think this one is a really nice new moon, especially for concepts that are maybe out in the ether. These are not hard and fast concepts coming in here. These are philosophies. They're really abstract. But it is a good time to tap into the spiritual center and to tap into your intuition and your inspiration and all those mystical words that you can think of. So then, what's next here? We got Venus in Sagittarius square Saturn in Pisces on December 20th. I want to say it's late at night in the southern central United States, maybe a little less late in the western side of the US. And it could be December 21st if you're on the opposite side of the globe. So just pay attention to that if you're looking for exact times. But this is, the Sag square, stressful. Squares are stressful. Saturn is already something that kind of pushes and it pressures. And Venus is what we love and what we value. So this is kind of a reality check, okay? Venus and Sag is like, oh yeah, I really love this thing. And Saturn's like, are you sure about that? Because it's where we ask, is this sustainable? You may feel even a little bit of disappointment around this day in something. There could be some distance from a relationship or some doubt about your finances because Venus does rule love and money, and Saturn is just that question of, is this going to work? So I would say it's a reframing. It doesn't mean anything is necessarily wrong. It is being clarified around this Venus square to Saturn. And, Saturn doesn't take away things that are meant to be. Saturn can take away. Saturn takes away things that are already unsupported. So I would say this is devotion, even in the face of doubt. That's why I have someone waving a flag. It's like, the flag bearer in battle who believes in their country and waves the flag even under the pressure of battle. And I'm not necessarily saying this is a battle situation. Please don't take it that way. But it is something we're trying to figure out, are we devoted to this? And at the same time, it should be noted that the sun is square Neptune at this time. So we still have that foggy sort of vibe from the new moon. But what I do like is that the moon and Mars are in Capricorn. It's a little more grounded than the new moon was the day before. So yeah, I would say, it's testing what we hold dear, what we want to commit to. I wouldn't force things around this time. Don't spend money to soothe yourself. That's not a good idea around this time. And especially with the sun square Neptune, it's listen to quiet signals as well. One other thing that I do want to mention is Mercury at the square point to the nodes. The nodes are where eclipses happen, and eclipses are known as points of fate. And I think this is significant as well. Mercury is how we think. And this is a turning point. It's like we do have to decide something, I think. It's called at the bendings, if you want to know the astrology term. And I thought that was significant as well for this specific transit. So, yeah, testing something, testing commitment, testing whether something actually is supported or whether it was just a pipe dream. So I would say I think the best thing to do is to listen and to make sure that you're not being overly deluded about something. I think it's helpful that when the sun is square Neptune, which is a time we can be deluded and delusional, that the Venus is square Saturn. So if something is not working, maybe pay attention to why that is. Okay. So December 21st, it's the solstice. Sun enters Capricorn. This is always one of my favorite times of year. It's like Yule, and we're going into the holidays, and it does feel magical. So I really like that. And it's the turning point of the light, and it is an anchor moment because if you think about it, especially in the Northern Hemisphere, things are really cold. If you were an ancient human, there wouldn't be much food to be had. You would have to make sure you were even prepared for the rest of the cold season, right? And I do tend to think of it like that because I live in the Northern Hemisphere. Either way, for either hemisphere, it's a turning point of light. It's when either the sun is going to start losing light in the Southern Hemisphere or in the Northern Hemisphere when it's exactly when we start to gain light again. So I think that's why it's so magical. The light even looks different from the sun around this time. So yeah, we've talked a little bit about Capricorn already. It's where things become, very clear if it's a responsibility or not. And that's the overarching theme. And you have to think about the fact that it's not just the sun, the moon is even there at the solstice, Mars is there at the solstice. So we've got a few things in Capricorn that are asking us, where did the vision of Sagittarius, where does it become reality in Capricorn? So it's the beginning of a new solar cycle. And I think we focus on structure a lot when it is the Capricorn solstice. And I think the reason I have the water mill here is because it's not all earth. And that is because Jupiter is in Cancer. And that really stands out to me because that's the opposite sign of Capricorn. And the moon's almost opposite of Jupiter whenever we have the solstice. And so, the image of the water and the structure working together explains this moment in time really well. And then we also have the water of Saturn and Neptune in Pisces, which is also water sign, the North Nodes in Pisces. So I feel like this water mill is really descriptive. And, there's one more thing I want to talk about is that at the solstice, Jupiter and Chiron are almost exactly square. They squared sometime just hours before this. Okay. And I feel like this is a moment where we have to really find out who our people are. And I think also that was the day before with Venus square Saturn, a time where we figure out what we commit to, but also for our own safety, our own good. That's what Cancer does. It looks at our safety. And Chiron is the wounded healer, so there's some emotional aspects to this solstice, so where do emotions and energy flow best, I guess, when they have the right container of Capricorn? I think that's a good way to put it. It's good during this season, especially because we're still in that kind of new moon time to choose something to commit to. And it doesn't have to be perfect, but especially choosing one thing to focus on and choosing to focus on your own healing, your own family, your own safety. I think that's a really good thing to do during this specific solstice season, probably all of them, but this one specifically because of Jupiter and Cancer. I think that just about does it for the solstice this year. So we'll go on and move on to the next transit that I have. So December 24th, Venus enters Capricorn. Now, this is where I think that everything starts to really turn. And again, Capricorn is not like the easiest sign. It's also not the hardest sign. And I don't really even like to think in those terms. But I feel like it's a tone shift when Venus moves into Capricorn because, Sagittarius is such a jolly sign. Capricorns are funny too. I mean, think about how a goat laughs. So I think that's Krista from Practical Astro says that a lot, and it sticks with me. But Venus in Capricorn is really grounding. And with all the squares to Neptune that happened before this, we have one more to go. Mercury will square Saturn and Mercury will square Neptune after this. But with all of that, I think it's really nice to feel, okay, like we're starting to really get more grounded. We went through this kind of time of confusion. That's okay. But Venus in Capricorn values consistency and structure. Again, I'll say structure 8 billion times for this because that's true over like chemistry, let's say, because Venus in Sagittarius really loves chemistry and passion. Venus and Capricorn is like, is this consistent? Is this going to work? Is this reliable? And, I think that makes sense during this time, especially with the kind of the outer world, what's going on. You can take a look at the news every day, no matter where you are, and see something. And we're getting that onslaught constantly now. You would have to turn on the news to find it before. Now, with social media and the way things are just thrown in our faces constantly, it's good to feel grounded and to find out what has staying power, and to look at the structures in your life and let those be a container for your emotions, because during this Capricorn season, we're going to have oppositions to Jupiter and Cancer emotions. So I guess on a more mundane micro level, because Venus is money and values, money decisions can be pretty sobering around this time. I know in the US economy is not that wonderful right now. And I think it's already been sobering during this holiday season. I just decided personally, I'm not doing gifts with my family. I don't need any more Amazon stuff. I don't. Anything I need, I pretty much get myself. Anything that I really would want or value is probably too expensive to buy right now for anyone in my family. And if anything, I think what I value is things like the little kids in my family being excited. That kind of choked me up. I can't believe that. It did, because that's true. I think that's what I value, is the magic and not the consumerism. And I think that's what this Venus and Capricorn season is kind of showing us. And at this point, we're here at Christmas. So it may not be more a question of that, but I definitely think it's going to show itself. Now, a few hours after this, what I love is that the moon will move into Pisces and sextile Venus, and sextiles are opportunity. And Pisces is that broad love and without limits. And so at this point, this is when I think it's time to, give each other a helping hand. Sooner or later, in February of 2026, Saturn and Neptune will move back into Aries, which is a very individualist sign. Actually, even if you look at the Sabian symbol for Saturn right here, it is individualistic. And that's so funny in Pisces to me, but that's why I love the Sabian symbols, because it always kind of hits the mark. But it's one of those things that I think everyone's pretty prone to individualism right now. Even Chiron and Aries shows that. And you know what? Jupiter square Chiron and Aries is like that, kind of hurts my feelings. I see it on a daily basis. So when the moon moves into Pisces and sextiles Venus, this might allow us to really enjoy the people in our lives and look at how we can help each other up the Capricorn mountain. So I guess for Venus entering Capricorn, I do think it's going to be quite nice, considering we don't have any more squares to Saturn to deal with except for Mercury. And that's always pretty quick. And that'll happen, I want to say, the next week. I could be totally wrong about that. But guess what? I'll be back for the next Wednesday to Wednesday, December 24th through 31st, another holiday where we talk about New Year's Eve and maybe a little bit of the new year. So I guess if something survives this week, it's worth it. And if something falls away, it might have been asking for too much too soon. You can probably ask yourself some questions like what commitments feel realistic? What can wait? What beliefs from Sagittarius want grounding in Capricorn? And I think we never get all the answers, right? And that's kind of unattainable, but we just need a very truthful, honest next step in whatever we're doing in our lives. So as Venus enters Capricorn, we're going to ask ourselves to focus on what will last in our lives, and support us. So I hope that, at the new moon, you can set some intentions and you can ask yourself for the squares to Saturn and Neptune for clarity, and for especially clarity in what structures are going to be best, how we can build what lasts. And I'll be back for December 31st for Asterios Via Kairos Ask Astrology. Thank you guys. I'll see you soon. You can find me at ecstaticastrology.com.